All righty, all you lovely people. I hope you had a nice quick break there and are ready now to kind of dig on in and talk about some moral dilemmas with Michael Walzer and me, I guess. Really just me. Walzer's here in spirit, I guess. He's still alive. He might be on Twitter. You should tweet him. Say, I read your article. It's wrong. Well, don't be nice. If you tweet people, because a lot of people we read are on Twitter. I don't know if you've looked. And I highly encourage you to tweet them. Just be nice. Don't embarrass your professor. Anyway. What were we talking about? Moral dilemmas, very important. So again, recall a moral dilemma, just a situation where each of the choices you make must be wrong in some way, and no amount of thinking about it can resolve that. It's just the nature of the situation and or the nature of morality in that situation. And I've already mentioned this is a concern in meta-ethics because this is having us reflect on the nature of our moral claims and whether moral claims can create these types of conflicts with each other. And in order to show why moral conflicts matter, Michael Walzer provides us this nice article with the impact of moral dilemmas on applied ethics, where we're looking now at moral dilemmas and the impact they have on situations of political leadership. And now Walzer is going to do this by discussing what he calls dirty hands. Oh, yes. If you look on page 164, scroll down a bit there on page 164, here you'll see Walzer say, oh, very bold claim here, no one succeeds in politics without getting their hands dirty. I repeat it, only to disclose the moral dilemma inherent in the convention. And so what Walzer's arguing and saying in that statement I just read is that there are unavoidable dilemmas for political leadership. It's just going to come with the job or come with the territory, however you want to see it. He thinks if you want to be a political leader, you're going to have to get your hands dirty. You'll have to be, or at least you'll have to be prepared to, and almost certainly will have to get your hands. He thinks this is going to be pretty unavoidable. It's just what comes with the territory. And so what does it mean then for a political leader to have or to get dirty hands? Now, Walzer believes that dirty hands reflect the idea that it's impossible for, as he says, for a political leader to govern and also govern while remaining innocent. That is, a political leader, he thinks, will just have to get their hands dirty because a leader will have to do certain things that are morally wrong. Bummer. Yeah, we'll see if you agree. By the end of this, we'll see if he convinces you. You might disagree with that. He'll think you're being naive, but we'll get there. Because how Walzer's going to express this just inevitability of dirty hands, this inevitability of a leader having to do morally wrong things at some point. He expresses this in a moral dilemma, which makes sense then, because everything you do in a moral dilemma will be wrong in some way. That's what a dilemma is. And so the dilemma that Walzer sets up for the political leader, the dilemma is between the utilitarian demand to promote the greater good. But that demand, that utilitarian demand comes in conflict with a more absolute deontology, where certain things are supposed to be off limits, certain things are supposed to be forbidden, certain things are just supposed to be morally wrong, full stop. You just don't do. So again, a conflict between utilitarianism and a more absolute deontology with constraints. We can see him really lay this out quite clearly. If you go back to page 161, scroll down a little bit there. Here we go. Now here we can see Michael Walzer characterize this dilemma of dirty hands by saying, quote, a particular act of government may be exactly the right thing to do in utilitarian terms, and yet leave the person who does it guilty of a moral wrong. The innocent person afterwards is no longer innocent. If, on the other hand, that person remains innocent, chooses, that is, the absolutist side of the dilemma, that person not only fails to do the right thing in utilitarian terms, they also they may also fail to measure up to the duties of their office, which imposes on them a considerable responsibility for consequences and outcomes. So now what Walzer is doing here is very interesting, very curious, and I think, it's just a lot going on here. This is awesome. Because this is where he is laying out that dilemma, of course, that I just mentioned between utilitarianism and a more absolutist deontology with pretty firm constraints. And so what Walzer is saying there is if you pick utilitarianism, yep, you will be violating a moral constraint of some kind in these dilemmas type situations. And that's what's going to make your hands dirty. The fact that you violated a constraint and did something morally wrong, your hands are now dirty and you are not innocent anymore. As he says, if you were innocent before, after that dilemma, nope, you are not innocent, you have dirty hands. But he also notes, on the other hand, he says, you could desire to satisfy the constraint. You could pick the absolutist, as he says, side of the dilemma. You remain innocent. You keep your hands clean. And of course, you're wrong according to utilitarianism, but hey, you got clean hands. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? So what's the problem there? But let's go back to that passage that I just read. The very last part there, by staying innocent, by keeping your hands clean, Walzer says, oh, this is brutal. You fail to measure up to the duties of your office, which imposes on you as the leader a considerable responsibility for consequences and outcome. Whoa. Walzer's saying there that all political leaders, if you want to be a political leader, just like any others, you have to think like a utilitarian as a leader. That is, Walzer maintains throughout this whole article that unless you want to be a petty dictator or a petty tyrant, a true leader must promote the greater good. I told you guys, this stuff is seductive. That's why I like that chant, the greater good. Because it just hypnotizes us, because it does seem to really matter. That's why I like this being the last discussion for this unit on utilitarianism and its limits, because we're seeing the last kind of seductiveness of utilitarianism as being something that a leader absolutely has to be concerned about. And we can see Walzer trying to develop this idea if you go to page 162. 162, if you scroll again all the way down to the very bottom there, here we see Michael Walzer say, the politician doesn't merely cater to our interests, they act on our behalf. Even in our name, that's important. The politician, they have purposes in mind, causes and projects that require the support and redound to the benefit, not of each of us individually, but of all of us together. They hustle, lie, and intrigue for us, or so they claim. Again, this is Walzer saying that the job of a leader is to think like a utilitarian, because the leader is, as he says there, it's not about benefiting each of us individually. That's probably impossible. But the leader is supposed to benefit all of us together. Again, this is all what Michael Walzer is saying there. And notice another interesting, this is going to be profoundly, profoundly important. Write this down. It's on the test. Should be on the test. We'll see. I'm evil. I apologize. I really want you guys to like this because I think this is a cool article. What am I talking about? Something very fascinating that Walzer is emphasizing here. Not just simply that you're supposed to be a utilitarian, not simply that the leader has to care about all of us together and not just each of us individually, which again could very well be impossible. But the leader is doing all of this. Everything the leader does, again, a true leader, not a dictator, not a tyrant, the leader does this in our name. For us. That's what Walzer's emphasizing there. The leader, the true leader, according to Walzer, says, we are doing this. The leader doesn't say, I am doing this. The leader says, we are doing this. And we're doing this because this is what we need to do. So that's both utilitarian, but also this powerful idea that the leader is not acting as an individual, that the leader is acting as our representative. Because again, that's such an important idea that's going to come back at the very end of this module. So file that away. This idea that a true leader is, yes, utilitarian, but even more so, the true leader acts for us in our name. The leader is supposed to be enacting our representative because they're doing this for us in our name. I hope that makes sense. Because yeah, the true leader isn't doing it for themselves or because the leader wants it. They're doing it for us because it's something that we want or we need. That's acting in our name. And there's some other things that are pretty important as well that'll come out, I think, as we're talking through this module, that there are some other things about political leadership that's pretty important as well. For instance, political leaders have great power over you and me who are not, well, unless you're the president, then hello, sir. You have lots of power over me. Hello. No, but political leaders have great power over the rest of us because they have the full apparatus of the state, the police, the military, whatever. They have the full apparatus of the state behind them to enforce their commands. So they can order me and you, they can order us because of that great power to do things. And of course, as Walzer's saying, these should all be done for the greater good. The greater good. Yeah. So yeah, the political leaders can order the military, those in the military, to risk their lives in combat. Political leaders can order you and I to go through strip searches and other humiliating things at an airport, But again, they're doing all this type of stuff. It's done for us in our name. It's done for national security. It's done for the greater good. The greater good. And of course, because of all that, the political leader can also do great violence against us. Again, if it's needed to promote that greater good. The greater good. Yeah, they can do violence against us. And of course, in the name of national security, we are quite familiar, I think, with this idea, whether it's really great violence or just mild, strip searches or whatever that happens at airports these days. I haven't been to one in a while. I scared of flying these days. But whatever. Walzer is just saying, yeah, political leaders, yes, we may want them to be good people who refuse to violate certain constraints, but yet what's the leader's job? What's the resume or what's the job requirements? It's to promote the greater good. The greater good. For each of us. And so there are times where the leader's going to find that they have to get their hands dirty. They have to violate those constraints to do their job. And Walzer thinks this is a fundamental lesson that all political leaders have to learn, that you must get your hands dirty. And indeed, Walzer's clear on this point too, is that even to just become a leader, to win that first election or get that first political leadership position, just to get that career in politics started, will likely require getting your hands dirty. Look on page 164. Jump to page 164 of Walzer here. And here's what you'll say, what Walzer is saying about people who want to be leaders. These people who want to be leaders, they are then required to learn the lesson Machiavelli first set out to teach, how not to be good. They will not succeed unless they learn, for they have joined the terrible competition for power and glory. They have chosen to work and struggle, as Machiavelli says, among so many who are not good. They can do no good themselves unless they win the struggle, which they are unlikely to do. That is, they're unlikely to win unless they are willing and able to use the necessary means. A fun little reference to Machiavelli. I recommend it if you like to learn more about this type of stuff. But back to Walzer, though, this is the point of the first example Walzer gives in his text, which is about the politician who is willing to make some, maybe legal, but definitely ethically shady deals concerning contracts for school construction. I won't go into the details, but the idea is that to get elected, the politician will have to make that deal, will have to get their hands dirty by doing something shady. And I'll be honest, if you sit back and we're in a presidential election here, but there's always politicking going on, right? Is that no matter which political candidate you favor in an election, that candidate has almost certainly made some shady and ethically questionable deals. If you dig, you'll find something, I have no doubt. And they did it, of course, to help them get elected. So they had to get their hands a little dirty. I'm not saying everyone's equally dirty, but they're getting dirty somehow. But of course, when it's the candidate we like, we are often willing to excuse it as it's something necessary that's needed for them to get elected. Yes, and once that person is elected, that person we like can go about the noble business of making the country or whatever better, right? But of course, your candidate cannot do any good if they aren't elected. And especially if that's what Machiavelli says, the good person is surrounded by bad people. And those bad people will do literally anything to get elected. So if you're a good candidate, you're going to have to get your hands at least a little bit dirty so you can win that struggle and do the good. Because otherwise the bad people get elected and will do bad things. And again, I think we all recognize that because we think our candidate's good, the other candidate's bad. I assume this is feelings that have been expressed. It's nothing strange there. And so again, Machiavelli says this too, but what Walzer's saying, a perfectly honest candidate will never get elected. Or if they do somehow manage to get elected, they'll never stay in power longer. I think if you think of truly honest candidates, they never make it past the primary. And if somehow they do, they don't get elected. And if they somehow do get elected, they don't stay in power very long. They lose an election or they get impeached or whatever. Something happens. And so Walzer and Machiavelli would both say, don't be naive. A truly honest candidate will get eaten alive by the career politicians who are willing to get their hands dirty. Full stop. And I'll pause and let you think about that for maybe a second. Whether you think that's true, that an honest candidate is doomed to never get power and so will never be able to do the good things you want them to do. I mean, that's troubling. I pulled some Cheetos out of the fridge, so I'll enjoy these while you wait. Oh, yeah. Okay. Sorry. You're back already? All right. You talking about it? Anyway, think about it. Tweet me. I think it's a very interesting thing. Because again, you want your candidate to do good for the nation. You may also like the candidate because you think they're a good person. But they have to get elected. And so Walzer says, yeah, maybe we want the honest candidate to win, even if that candidate has to be a little bit dishonest and do some shady things to get elected. Because at least that candidate knows it's wrong and dishonest. Because they're a generally honest, good person. They know that when they're getting their hands dirty, they're like, ugh, I hate having to do this, but I want to do good. I have to win the election. And after all, it could be far worse because you could have the political leader who is completely dishonest and is perfectly fine with that. And he's like, no big deal. I told some lies. Who cares? Oh, dirty hands. Oh, whatever. Let's just polish it. Whatever. And so some very interesting things to think about. But anyway, let me just one last time try to pull all this together. Walzer is saying political leadership will inevitably encounter a dilemma between utilitarianism and absolute deontology. And dirty hands involves being that utilitarian because the job description is about overall good of everyone. But that at times may require breaking some important fundamental constraints. And so at the very least, the politician will have to be maybe a little dishonest, even just to get elected and maintain power, or at least a little shady, shall we say. This is what it means to have dirty hands, according to Walzer. And us, when we select our political leaders, we would like our political leaders to recognize, there is a dilemma here for dirty hands. We want our leaders to recognize and accept they are doing wrong. They are getting their hands dirty. We want our leaders to know that. But we also want to know that they're doing this not for fun, but to promote that greater good. And so again, Walzer thinks we're way more worried about the politician who sees no dilemma here, who don't see that they have to do wrong in order to do the greater good. That is, we're suspicious of politicians who deny and refuse to accept that what they're doing is wrong, who refuse to accept that they're actually getting their hands dirty. Those are the politicians that worry us. And we'll come back to that in a couple of videos to really see it, about these politicians who feel no guilt or shame when they get their hands dirty. That seems to scare us. And I do worry, though, at this point, this is a little vague, and I don't know if it's sinking in quite yet. So I think that's where we can, right now, let's take a quick break, stretch, relax our eyes a little bit, decompress if needed. And we'll come back and we'll see how Walzer applies everything I've just said to the example of torture. But first, stretch, rest your eyes.